you're going to have much more success with whatever you're trying to convert them to. So it comes back to warmth all the way at the top. Right. But yeah, informing them along the way, let's just say, for example, like being really obvious about what people are getting at the ad level is definitely going to increase your conversion rate at the landing page, at the opt-in level,
right?
Even if you're more sparse, 100%.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your host, Corrin, and with me, as always, is Jack. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm isolated. I'm safe. So
yeah,
my Amazon packages are taking more than 2 days, but first world probs. Otherwise,
yep.
Otherwise, doing great. Everyone's healthy and happy at my house. Hopefully, at yours as well.
Yeah, everybody is healthy and happy here. Just keeping a low profile in quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift our focus to something a little more fun, which I know that this is one of Jack's favorites. Jack has actually been working on this training in the background. It'll come out later this year, but you're going to be working on some permission-based stuff, aren't you, Jack?
I am, and I'm super excited to be developing it, over the next few months and get it out there.
Yeah.
But I'm super pumped to talk about it a little bit today, and talk about where the permission stage of the buddy system fits into some of the things that we were talking about in last week's episode.
Right. So we're obviously not going to go over the buddy system, of course, ad nauseum, right? But permission is basically after people find out about you, at what point do you ask them for some information so that you can give them something, right? And so basically you're asking for permission to contact them directly instead of them following you or watching you in a more passive sense. This is where the conversation starts to open into something a little bit more, for lack of a better term, intimate. So a lot of indies will try to do this too soon in their ecosystem. And there are varying opinions on how soon you should start making offers. I don't really wait very long. I just make offers right away, but that's because I have advertising in front of it to prepare them to be ready. But if you aren't running a lot of campaigns and, getting a lot of warmth and getting a lot of information to these new fans very quickly, it may be something that you want to delay a bit. So that's kind of why we decided to bring it up, right? We constantly see people who are not sure when to start their permission phases. They're not sure how to do permission phases. And then they don't understand once they do execute some campaigns for opt-ins, they don't understand why they don't work. And so that's why this is a great conversation for today.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that really plays into a lot of what we talked about last week when we were talking about $1 a day advertising and using that strategy, that campaign structure to warm up your audience further, whether you're building them on the front end with ads, with like top of funnel fan finder video ads, or whether you're just building up an audience with your organic content. Maybe you get a lot of people paying attention to you, a lot of eyeballs, and new listeners being generated organically. Keeping them warmed up to take them to the next step is really, really important. So I think that this is kind of a great next discussion point, just based on what we talked about last week.
Absolutely. Yeah. So permission is one of the two phases that we see indies struggle with the most, right? It's not hard to run a fan finder. You usually can, do that pretty easily and pretty well. After the first couple of iterations, you're probably getting video views at a reasonable cost, finding your audiences, all of that's kind of dialed in, but then getting them into the permission phase, which getting them to message you, getting them to sign up for your mailing list for something, that can be more difficult. The other phase that indies struggle with is affirmation. And so we concentrate a lot on those two. I'm sure Jack does at the IndieX level as well. But at Indie Founder, we also spend a lot of time talking about that stuff. In fact, I do want to announce that we have a Indie Founder permission splinter that we just launched, and we're going to be doing a 6-week beta. Our plan is to make this specific permission session 4 weeks eventually, but we're going to beta in 6 just to make sure. I don't know if seats will be sold out by the time this podcast goes live, but if you are interested in that, you can go to bit.ly/Indie Founder Permission, all one word, and that would bring you to that. But essentially, we're running this beta at $195 instead of the price it will be, which is $395 once it's full. But we are focusing on that because indies struggle with, okay, how do I set up the ads in front of this whatever offer that I'm making them to get their contact information? What do my ads look like? Do they recognize me coming into this, right? And then once they get to a page that's trying to talk to them about whether or not they should give this email, what is the offer? What are you going to give them? Some artists have had success with unreleased songs, but we're seeing that struggle more and more, right? Because still it's essentially a music download, right? So now sometimes downloads can work for indies, but there are times when it doesn't. So what do you do when you get stuck there, right? So, and then also just the cost per lead, right? We're looking at how much does it cost me to convert these people? And is there something that I can streamline or pivot or make, more enticing so that my cost for these people coming in goes down? And that could be an audience thing. It could be a page thing. It could be an offer thing. So there's a lot of different things that you can troubleshoot in that process. And Jack has had to do it on so many levels for so many clients. And he loves permission just as a phase and working in it. So that's why I thought it'd be really great to have this conversation with Jack. So Jack, at the IndieX level for the agency, where do you find permission coming into play? And, what problems you see and how have you pivoted to kind of make those things move along a little more smoothly?
Yeah, for sure. It's such a good question, and such a great topic because, and the reason that I feel so strongly about the permission stage and what artists can do in it is because you can get so insanely creative with what you do with the permission stage of your buddy system. It really becomes an extension of all the other pieces of your creativity, your songwriting, your recording, your videos. The permission stage can really be, I see it as a huge extension of that. The content that you're putting out, all that sort of stuff that you're doing on the front end, when you, as an artist, when you can, take that creativity and channel it into this stage and this really crucial part of building your fan base where you're getting the digits, I think it's really, really useful to be able to channel your creativity there. So little rant on that, just to say why I care about this so much, because if you don't put your creativity into it and you try to use some boilerplate template, it will often fall short. And that's one of the big problems that I've seen when I've had consults with indies, and also at IndieX at the agency level, when we've had artists come on board that have permission stage assets in place already, auditing them and seeing, where the problem areas are. Oftentimes it has to do with the content that's leading into those offers or the content that is the offer itself. Right. It's oftentimes somewhat lackluster and not really exciting to the fans. So that's something that we see a lot of and work to kind of rectify. So I wanted to share with you on the podcast today some of the things that we've been seeing more and more recently, and a couple permission bribes that we've seen kind of working gangbusters right now, and why. And I think it's really important to talk about why, because again, I don't want people to take this and run with the things that we're saying here and just kind of apply it to themselves willy-nilly and assume that it will work, because that's totally not the case. Right. This is just, kind of fuel for the brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, there are plenty of templates, right? And even in some of our trainings, you'll see that there are permission templates, right? A lot of our emails. I said army emails. A lot of our emails, they, tend to be kind of inspired by digital marketers templates, right? Even though we've far pivoted beyond that, obviously, Circa and Jack have their copy dialed in, but when they were learning, they were looking at examples. So I think it's great to kind of see how other people are doing some things because, it's that whole steal like an artist mentality, right? You're not technically ripping them off. You're just saying like, okay, I'm a creative person. That's why I'm a musician. So how are other creatives channeling these other facets of their creativity so that they can do something that's actually going to work for permission? And so that's why I think, looking at all of these examples can really help fuel the fire for when you're brainstorming what you can do with your own creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's 100% on the money. That's exactly how I feel about it too.
Most def. So can we kind of do this in almost like a funnel evaluation, right? Go from like the top of where we would start talking about permission to the successful completion, right? So like first we would start with, the advertising, right? Like how did people find you in the first place? And what are you doing to connect them from that fan finder, for example, to the place where you're making them an offer? Right? If we see a lot of drop off with lyric videos, for example, because the lyric video may or may not have an image of you. They may not necessarily recognize you. So even if you do something really cool with your opt-in ad where you're like, hey guys, I'm going to be doing this and it's a talking head kind of ad. Obviously they're not going to even recognize the fact that necessarily that was you that they saw in the first place. Right. So what are some things that you've done at the top level, Jack, for people who are, when you're strategizing what kind of creative you're using for permission-based ads, what kind of stuff are you looking at when you are building those out?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think that's a really good way to approach just talking about this. But I want to take it even up a step further when we talk about the very top of the funnel, how people are discovering you, before the permission ad, let's say. What does the content look like that people are seeing you for the very first time? Because that's really important. We go into that pretty heavily when we talk about fan finder campaigns and what makes a fan finder campaign to spec versus to not. For example, like what you were saying about lyric videos and how if that's your first touch where somebody's discovering you, they might not even, recognize who you are. That's a lot of the same reason that we often see, narrative style music videos not really facilitate the introduction phase of the buddy system, the discovery process quite as well, because there's not that connection that's made that this is somebody that I should be paying attention to, or even, subconsciously that if I see them again, I'll know who they are.
Right.
So there was I mentioned that because there's a couple elements to that I think are really important. One is dialing in your content at the very top of your funnel to ensure that when people see you again, whether that's in, secondary content that you're showing them, at like the education stage where they're able to go a little bit deeper with you, whether it's recurring content that you're putting out on a regular basis, or whether it's a permission stage ad or opt-in offer, whether it's on your website or on your socials or whatever, that they know who you are. And I think, connecting that content at the very top of the funnel and making sure that people are able to recognize you is really important. But then also connecting with people at the engagement level. Something I see far too often, even at IndieX, with some of the artists that we work with, is they've got great top of funnel assets, whether it be, viral videos on YouTube that are just, they go gangbusters every time that they drop them, or really great fan finder campaigns. And a lot of times what you see is fans will fall away, or you'll kind of go out of their consciousness a little bit if you're not paying attention to them and giving them a little bit of love. Right. So something to keep in mind with that is getting in the comments, getting in the comments and engaging with your fans, talking with them at that very, very top of the funnel. I think that that's really critical to the permission stage. I'm kind of, I'm ranting on this a little bit, but it's mission critical, I think, to be engaging with the fans at the very top, because that's going to fast track them to the point where you can get the digits. You can ask for permission. If you're having a conversation with them, and not trying to automate the process so heavily at the very top, that's going to increase the likelihood that your permission campaigns are going to succeed. So that's kind of like step one to me at the very, very top.
Right. And so when you're thinking about ads, as far as like when you're going to run a permission campaign, that's what you have to evaluate, right? Like, what can you actually take from that top of level connection that then feeds into the ad that's going to go for permission? Or even if you're doing like a green light warmth boost kind of strategy on it, the post needs to have some kind of connection. You can't assume that people will have seen something in a video and automatically recognize your face. Like, how many people do you see in passing, even if you like something? I'll see I have brightly colored hair. So when I see someone in public, I'll probably notice their hair, but would I remember their face, right? So this is a similar thing where maybe they hear your music and they like it, but that doesn't mean that they're now ingrained in your mind. And so there's something that you have to do to ensure that your very first impression upon them is something that is recognizable, and then that you give them the opportunity to recognize that in your next video. And that's why we, recommend against like visualizers and lyric videos for that first video, is because how are they going to know it was you? How are they going to recognize you? It's not because the post came with your page's name on it. That's not enough, So
absolutely.
It's definitely important to think about how those two things relate to each other. If you have that kind of creative in the very first step of exposure and you don't put something else in front of them before you try to gather an email, chances are you're going to get a very low conversion rate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That really is like the core of it. And I think something that helps when you get to the permission stage and you're putting together permission stage ad creatives and ad copy is finding ways to harken back to what they saw in the first place. That might be, for example, and I've seen this work well with some of our artists at IndieX, is including a snippet in your permission ad creative from what they might have seen previously. So if you're running a fan finder campaign, that might be a little snippet of what they previously saw to remind them, hey, this was something that you watched. This was something that you dug. Remember when we talked about this? Right. Remember when we commented back and forth, messaged back and forth? That's the kind of thing that can work really well to kind of connect and bridge those two stages together.
Definitely. Yeah, that's great. So what are some, let's kind of dive into your agency experience here. Have you seen an example where somebody had like a less than stellar top of funnel and you kind of helped guide them into bringing something else into the fold so that their permission ad might work better?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think one of the things that I find is helpful when diagnosing like poorly performing top of funnel, apart from, just generally refactoring it all together, refactoring top of funnel altogether, which in many cases is the first place that I would go to. If you're just seeing that there's an audience that's just not warm, well, then you need to go back and find new ways to start that. However, what I find, usually what goes on in conjunction with a top of funnel audience that's not warmed up is oftentimes the offer that's being made in permission is also, kind of a lukewarm offer.
Right.
That's what I see. I would say like 9 out of 10 times that's what I see.
No.
9 out of 10 times that's what I see, is that it's just a lukewarm offer. It might just be like a free download and there's really no specificity to it. So what I often go to right then and there when I'm diagnosing a funnel is I look at the offer and I say, okay, is this obvious and explicit to why someone should care about it? Kind of goes back to the who gives a shit question. Why, if you have an audience that's even slightly warmed up and you put an offer in front of them that's very lukewarm, the chances that they will take action on it is pretty low. However,
Right.
if you put an offer in front of an audience that even slightly is intriguing to them beyond what you've had before, I think that's where you can at least start to move the needle in a better direction. So what I do is I look at, diagnosing where the offer has problems. Is it explicit? Is it obvious what people are going to get from it? Does it have actual value?
Right.
And what is that value? Does it explain it to the fans right then and there in the ad to sell the click? That's kind of the first starting place that I look specifically when it comes to making that connection.
Right. That totally makes sense. I mean, I think this is an opportunity for us to, address again, like, there are ways that you can create, lead magnets, right, as we call them, or offers, bribes for permission that come from things you already have, right, that come from content you maybe have created. But
Totally.
that doesn't mean that if you don't have that content already, that you should just go with something else that you have, because that might not be as enticing as you think, And so I think this has been ingrained in us over years and years, like even going back to like noise trade, right? Where it's like, oh, give me your email, I'll give you a download, right? And it really took kind of the romance out of it. I don't even think it's that. We don't even have to look at it in a utilitarian fashion where it's like, well, they're not really going to use that or whatever. We don't sell CDs because people are going to use them, right? There's a romanticism to why we're selling that CD, right? If they, went through an album launch, for example, they've been through a whole experience with you. It's a memorabilia item more than anything else. So in the same way, we want to start thinking about our permission offers in that way, right? And really crafting something that feels special. And I think that's really, kind of the thing that is missed. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't repurpose past content that you've created and make that into something, but you definitely need to have in mind that if it's demo sessions, for example, right? Songs that you never put out and they're like acoustic demos of them or something like that. What is going to go with that to make that feel really special? I think, this is a time to be, if you were to ask, for example, for someone's, information, you would probably want to do something cool for them in the meantime, right? Like walk up with a bouquet of flowers and be like, let's go out, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
What have you seen, Jack, where people may have repurposed things they already had, but then amped it up and made it special for when they decided to create that offer?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And that's something that we talk about a lot in our strategy, like the ultimate album launch, right? Kind of like our experiential album launch strategy that we use. That's a topic that comes up often, like how do you make it special? How do you make it more than just people getting an album, and you stretch it out over the course of a number of days and there's tons of bonus content. But that same, like you were saying, that same concept applies to content that you have in your back pocket and you want to repurpose. It doesn't necessarily have to be a live album launch or something like that. So one example that I love to share that is really, really cool was something from one of our IndieX agency clients, a band called Small Town Titans. And we've talked about them before here on this podcast. And something pretty cool that they did as a permission offer was they wanted to take a number of their songs and put them together in like a 5-day journey, not unlike what we do in like an ultimate album launch. But what we did was, rather than taking a new record or even an old record, they took a number of songs that they kind of hand curated that they felt really, really strongly about. And what they did was they made kind of a backstage experience with these songs. They said, hey, we're going to handpick, 5 of our, what we consider to be our greatest hits, our most important songs to us as a band. And what we're going to do with them is we're going to take you guys backstage with us to our rehearsal space. And every day over this little journey that they put together, they had these exclusive videos kind of going behind the scenes of what a rehearsal day would look like for them, from the songwriting stage to what it looked like when they were prepping for shows, loading up the van, all of that kind of stuff. And they had these cool little skits, and they were really, really like heavy on the content, and those guys are really, really good at making creative videos, and their fans really dig their sense of humor. So they baked all of that into the videos that they put into this 5-day Optin campaign experience. And it was really, really cool. And the fans dug it. So it was more than just giving a free download. It was like, hey, step behind the scenes, come into the rehearsal space with us. Let's hang out. Like, we want to learn more about you, and we want you to learn more about us. So that was a way of them making content that was already out there more exclusive by what they added to it.
Right. And what's cool about that too is that I suppose if you're like, hey, okay, I got this backlog of stuff that's cool, and I want to offer that, but it's probably not enough in and of itself, so I need to create something else. I would suppose that like sprinkles down really well into like inspiring you to think of what could spin off of that, rather than starting from complete fresh, right? And like being like, okay, I'm going to sit down and think of something creative.
Right. Yeah,
that can be a little difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it seems like that would be a great opportunity. I mean, all of us have things in our backlog that maybe we wouldn't even want to share with people. But there's something you could spin off from that so that it makes sense. And you don't have to like start from total scratch when you're thinking about what you could offer as a permission bribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Another example of this comes from our IndieX artist, Dave Pettigrew, who we've had on the podcast here, and you and I have interviewed as well. And we came up with a pretty cool permission stage offer that we're running for him. And basically what it was is we took a handful of his songs from older records, actually, and what he did was, he's a Christian worship artist, so what we did was we packaged those songs with devotionals to go with each one. So it really catered to what his audience was into. And that's kind of another element of the creativity that we kind of talk about here, is like, what do your fans care about?
Right.
What do they like about you? It doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't necessarily have to be niched as like a religious artist of any kind. But what do your fans like about you? What do they like about your content? And how can you connect your older content that you might be trying to repurpose into something, a little bit bigger, and something that they like. So that worked out really, really well for him and got really, really cheap cost per lead, because it was something that his fans connected with, and we were able to just bake his content that we were using as the centerpiece into that.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think, it's interesting how what you've done with your fans in the past can inform things about the people who are probably going to like more stuff from you in the future. Right?
For sure. Yeah, and absolutely.
So have you seen people, like, as they develop things for permission, and obviously this is a little bit of an off skew, but when you have been developing these things with the past people in mind, have you then offered that to people who are already on the list as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially when there might be like a sales offer at the end, there's people on your list that, may not have purchased from you before. You've got subscribers hanging out that haven't jumped over to that affirmation stage of the buddy system. So if, for example, you have a permission offer that then has a sales offer on the back end, you can shake out some revenue from your existing subscribers there. Not to mention, what will often happen, and what I see fairly regularly, is if there's like experiential based content going on, mm-hmm. where fans can interact with each other, the ones that are already on your list that you offer this content to and you send it to them, they're likely to interact with the new people on there and get them sort of activated and excited about what's going on. It kind of builds upon the social proof of your permission offer. So in many cases, that can work really, really well.
Love that. Yeah, that's
very it's really cool.
And that's kind of when you're bringing in, and when we get, all the way around the buddy system, right? That comes into kind of advocacy, right? Even though these aren't people who are necessarily advocating for you to a cold audience because they're just interacting with people that you just brought in. nonetheless, like they are elevating that person's status in your buddy system, right?
100%.
Yeah. And what that does is, you know, it kind of psychologically plays into developing a tribe, and having the people who have been a fan of yours for a long time generate even more excitement when people are just coming in. You know, they come in and there's already this party of people who are already excited. And it's like, whoa, I should get excited too. This is exciting. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. It facilitates like crowd psychology a little bit online, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's very cool. Okay, so let's talk about landing pages and, let's go to ads first, right? So we've just got general ads, like we run at a low budget. We've got organic things that can generate permission, like your Facebook, call to action button or something on your website. If someone just is on your website for another reason, there's Facebook lead ads, right? And then there are ads that feed to a landing page specific. So Jack, kind of give me a breakdown of these different options for running them, and, you know, some pros and cons of each and what you've seen at the agency level.
Yeah, for sure. So oftentimes there's two main pathways for opt-ins that we use as far as where we're sending the traffic from our ads. In most cases, we're sending traffic from ads to an opt-in landing page. That's kind of generally the direction that I take for a lot of the clients that I work with directly. And I know the same can be said for our other account managers as well. That's one pathway that we use pretty frequently. Another pathway that we often use is through ManyChat. ManyChat JSON messenger flows. So using JSON ads to pull people into a flow where then we're asking for their email address, or even sometimes their email address and their phone number even. And I can go into that in a little bit. But those are kind of like two pathways that we see as being really, really solid. Facebook lead ads are actual lead forms that will populate right within the Facebook platform.
Nice.
They have some pros and also some cons. For one thing, there's kind of a pro to them on one hand, that they keep people on the platform, which Facebook likes to see. So oftentimes you will see a cheaper cost per lead when you're using the lead forms as your objective. Right. However, what does come along with that is those forms are pre-populated with the person's name and email address, what they have on file with Facebook. And a lot of times that information, specifically their email address, might be an email address that they used to sign up for Facebook 5, 8, 10 years ago, and it may not even be an email that they use. Right. Same thing goes for phone numbers. Collected on Facebook. A lot of times it's just a fake number. So what you do see when it comes to lead forms is lower quality of lead. A lot of times, like I said, the email address might be bad, or it might just be stale. So we tend to, at the agency, lean away from lead forms and lean more into landing page traffic. So using conversion objectives and messenger ads.
So just jumping back to lead ads for a second, because I actually had a founder ask me this on a coaching call just last night about lead ads. And he's like, it's easily the lowest cost. And so why do you guys recommend that? And, you know, we've run a lot of different tests, I know, at the agency level, and I've, you know, run my own tests as well as, you know, talked with friends who are running their own. And so what I ended up seeing with lead ads is that the open rate, I actually segmented them differently than people who are coming in from other places. Through Zapier, there's a Facebook leads zap that you can, you know, send people from lead ads to your automator. So for us, it was MailChimp. Yep. And the open rate was significantly lower, like 30 to 40% lower. Right. And otherwise we were getting like 60% open on those or higher. So when you start looking at, okay, the cost is, you know, half the cost of a landing page opt-in, but the open rate is a good percentage higher, you have to start calculating what your cost per lead is after that adjustment. right? And so when we did the math, the cost per lead from the Facebook ads, like active lead, right? A lead that someone was actually engaging with what was sent to them, was actually higher at that point, you know?
Yeah.
And Facebook can't do that part for you, right? That's some of the critical thinking that goes into some of this. So it is cool that people can just click a button, but it's a far lower intent because Facebook pre-populates it for them, or you can kind of create some manual fields so that it's not pre-populated and they have to physically type in their email. So that's a little different, which by the way, also tested in the middle. Right? So the different tests that I've run, and Jack, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong from your experience, but when I had lead ads that were auto-filled, I had the lowest open rate. And when I had lead ads, but they had to type in their email physically, it was, higher than just the auto-populated lead ads, but it was still lower than people coming from landing pages. And so then, again, doing the math, it's like, well, the cost per lead, for an active person who actually cared about what I was doing and then opened it and engaged further, was actually the lowest going to a landing page.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's really about intent. Just to unpack that a little bit, the amount of intention and engagement that someone needs to take to fill out a lead form that's populating on Facebook is very, very low.
Right.
For them to be taken off Facebook to a landing page where they have to read it and engage with the content on there and then enter in their info, raise their hand and say that they want something is much higher. And the same thing goes for like ManyChat. If they're brought into a flow, they read the flow, they engage with your bot, and they fill out their information right in there. Or any chatbot that you might be using, or if you're using, Facebook's built-in messenger leads, same thing applies. There's more intent and more engagement going on, leading to a higher quality of lead. And going to what you said about, doing custom fields for lead ads now, that's against Facebook's lead ads terms of service now. They changed that so that now you can't even collect emails with a custom field. So you're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a change since I did it. So good to know. Thanks, Jack. I won't do that again.
It's fairly recent, so you're not far behind.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
But and this is why we have Jack here, right? Is so that he can help us with the latest updates. So so it sounds like a landing page is the way to go. So when you start putting together a landing page, are you testing different versions, like long versions, short versions, video or photo, lots of copy, only a little bit of copy? What generally are you finding is the different things that are working or not working, or does it vary 100% per artist?
It really does vary really heavily per artist.
We hate that answer, don't we? But it's always true.
Yeah, that is seriously the truth. If there's any true answer to anything we ever say, it's that it varies and test it. Those are like the two truths of digital marketing. However, when it comes to split testing and things like that, I like to take an approach of being very heavy-handed in what I test from a variable level. So if I have a long form opt-in page, for example, with big, bold headline font and being very explicit about what people are getting and having a video creative, and then hosting the form right there, and then having testimonials and a further explanation of what they're going to be getting on the other side. My split test is most likely going to be the exact opposite of that, and I'm going to tear it down and make it very short form. Because what I find works best when you're split testing is to do kind of the polar opposite, or not the polar opposite, but a heavy amount of difference. Testing things like, your button color or your button call to action, those smaller granular things that you can split test. While there's absolutely value in that, when you're just diving into things and trying to validate a funnel for the first time, it's going to be the bigger sweeping changes that are going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So that's what I often look to.
Okay, I gotcha. So does it depend on, have you seen any kind of relative relationship between, if an artist is putting a lot more on the front, right? Like really doing a great job with their fan finder and then linking it very clearly with the ad and then going to the landing page, like if there's more copy or less copy, because it for me, like whenever I've tested and a lot of the advice that I give people, and hopefully it's not wrong, is that, I let a lot of the, stuff that comes before the landing page do the heavy lifting, because then they don't have as much like decision making to do once they get to that landing page. So do you see any kind of relative relationship between the two? Is that something I invented in my brain? Like what's your experience as far as that's concerned?
No, I definitely see that, and I can confirm that's 100% the case. I mean, that goes back to, in my mind at least, it goes back to the idea of warmth. How warm is your audience before they get to the point of opt-in? And what I see time and time again with artists at the agency level is if you've got a fan base that just wants what you do and they love it, you're going to have much more success with whatever you're trying to convert them to. So it comes back to warmth all the way at the top. But yeah, informing them along the way, let's just say, for example, like being really obvious about what people are getting at the ad level is definitely going to increase your conversion rate at the landing page at the opt-in level.
Right.
Even if you're more sparse. Yeah, 100%.
See, and that's a crazy, like I like to rely a lot on the front. And there've been plenty of ground reports or audits or different live sessions where I've shown like some of my opt-in pages, and they're literally like a Squarespace cover page that's got a little bit of text, just in case someone happens there organically. But otherwise it's just like, yeah, this is that thing I was telling you about. It's this, sign up. With an image. Yep. And it doesn't really do any kind of work for me. And we have, especially if you look in the trainings, like there are also examples of very long sales pages. And if you've been, if you've ever looked at other like digital marketer type sites, and I don't mean digital marketer the company, I just mean like marketing tools, you'll see these sales pages that are just novels long. And that's because somebody is making a really big decision about their purchase or their action at that point. So, do you see situations where it may still make sense for people to be making sales pages that long for just an opt-in, or are you keeping it pretty simple and trim? Or does it depend?
I think it depends. Okay. But I do find that having like, my view on opt-in pages kind of goes like this, like the above the fold, and this is something that we've talked about ad nauseum. The above the fold is like your prime real estate. So where you can be concise and clear and explicit about what your offer is in your above the fold section, that's where you're going to win the people who are invested in you and they love you and they just want what you're putting in front of them. So making the above the fold very clear and concise in that way, is great. And then below the fold, I think that's where I lean on, okay, the people who aren't super warmed up, how do I communicate the value to them in, the longer form sections of the opt-in page? And the below the fold is really where you look to do that. So that's where I see the value in doing that, is when you've got, an audience of varying warmth, which most artists, do. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to that. I wanted to share with you a little bit of an example of what you were talking about, how like doing the work on the front end and what that can mean to your, to your conversion rate, to your cost per lead, what that looks like. One of our IndieX artists is a very popular country artist, and we see him consistently engaging with his fans. They're just always engaging with his content. He goes live very, very regularly, and his fans just want to, hang out with him. He's very strong on the nurturing stage of the buddy system. What's really interesting is we ran about 2 weeks ago, actually, we ran a giveaway campaign, and we've been running regular giveaways as part of his permission stage to build up his list. And what we did was, it was a really, really simple bribe. It was just a giveaway. We were going to select a winner at random. just collect their name, and we were actually collecting phone numbers as well, and we were doing it through a flow in ManyChat. What we ended up seeing, and the giveaway was not anything absurd. It actually was it was a mug that was branded with an upcoming festival that he was putting on. So not anything super crazy, not anything super high ticket. It wasn't a big VIP experience or anything like that, but it was a cool offer that he knew his fans would be into because it was related to something upcoming that some of them probably weren't going to be a part of. And so we put together a really simple video ad, showing off the prize, letting them know how they could sign up, and they could click the button to get messaged message right there in Facebook, and they could enter their info to win. And what we ended up seeing was 6 cent leads with name, number, and email. So we got about 500 of them in within the course of like 4 days. Yeah, within the course of like 4 days, which was wild.
That is wild. Nobody feel bad if you're not getting those results. That's atypical.
I was just about to say, totally atypical results. This is one of those like those TV disclaimer moments.
Right. Results atypical only happens on a Sunday. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. But why I say this was, this artist has a fan base that's really warmed up on the front end, and new fans are consistently being warmed up on the front end. We're generating traffic, new listeners with fan finder campaigns all the time. And he's engaging with these people constantly. Always putting out new content. Like I said, going live often. And so there's a lot of warmth happening on the front end, so that when we put an offer out there like this, people want it.
Right.
There's virtually no friction. So this was a really cool example of like a giveaway style permission offer that just went gangbusters.
Yeah. I think that's really cool too, because like you're saying, it has to do with having a big warm audience, right? And prepping them so much. And that's, another reason, just to go back to what we were talking about last week, like, putting $1 a day on just even content that you may think isn't super important, that doesn't have a call to action on it. This is an opportunity for those people to keep seeing your face over and over and over and over. So by the time that you make an offer or have a contest or do something cool, you may not even need to run huge ads for this, right? Like this could just be something that, your audience is now warm enough that it's, costing you something negligible to get them to be into it, because they're into you, right? Like that's why they keep showing up. So I think that that's a really cool example of, what you can do with a large warm audience. Now, obviously people aren't going to have the large warm audience that this particular artist does, because he's got a huge warm audience and he's done a lot of different things in his career. So that's why he's at the agency level. But again, it can be inspiration to, do something on a smaller scale for indies who are, just starting out with this stuff, go live and have a lot of content out there, and maybe put a few bucks on it to make sure it's reaching the people that it really should, especially like a 90-day warmth audience or something like that, so that you can start generating that passive interest, and let that kind of add up in the Goodwill vault until you're ready to cash in.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to piggyback off of that, another example that we've seen work really well, that ties in, how you keep your audience warm, with, as little as like $1 a day, like we've talked about, is, one of our clients is a YouTube creator, a YouTube, like comedian. He puts out really, really great sketches, and what we've done for permission for
that are not advertising eligible.
Yeah, they are not advertising friendly.
They've got sexual references and bad words that Facebook doesn't like, and all kinds of context that can't be advertised. Like as a fan finder, we could never run that for him, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's worth prefacing too, to say like he's getting the bulk of his top of funnel awareness happening organically. which is great. But what we often do with, lower cost ads for him, just like $1 a day, is taking snippets of his recurring content, his videos that are coming out week to week, taking clean snippets of them and running $1 a day traffic on them to keep the fans warmed up in the meantime. And then what we do to take it to the next level, to the permission stages, and this is a strategy that we see often work well as a bribe, is kind of like an early or priority access to content that's coming out.
Very cool.
So what we'll run is, off the back end of his $1 a day traffic, greenlight warmth boosting is retargeting people in his warm audience with an opt-in for early access, saying, hey, if you want to get my videos before anybody else, or right the minute that they drop, I'll send them to your phone. We were actually doing SMS permission campaigns in this case, but you could do it for email, you could do it for Messenger, whatever you want. And it works really, really well. So kind of working to keep your audience warm after the initial discovery, with low cost greenlight warmth boosting, and then going after them with a recurring content opt-in sort of bribe can work really, really well. And that can work for people that are putting out consistent content, whether that be a video series on YouTube that they drop on, Mondays at 3:00, or if they're going live on Facebook at 8 p.m. on Tuesdays. That sort of thing can apply in numerous cases, which is really cool.
Yeah. And it really does kind of solidify that need for recurring content. And perfect segue, that is why we'll be talking about that next week, is figuring out your recurring content strategy. And so that's why I'm really excited that all of these kind of come together so well, right? Because obviously we're talking about greenlight warmth boosting last week, and that training is available on indepreneur.io right now. And we've also, now we've kind of talked about permission, and we've got a permission founder happening. And so that's so exciting. It all kind of folds together, So next week we're going to be talking about that recurring content. How do you strategize it? What are the kinds of things that you can do by looking at your own brand, looking at your personality, the personality of your artistry, and tying all that into something? Obviously, live streaming and playing, sometimes that starts to kind of peter out on you creatively. None of us have a discography of like 1,000 songs that you could just do, 10 a week forever, So there's definitely different ways that you need to brainstorm to figure out, okay, what do people like about me? What can I offer them that is more of that? And how do I create a recurring content strategy from that? And so I'm really excited for us to talk about that. I mean, this is the month that we are talking about. Right now, so many people are online. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube. They are consuming content like crazy. So this is the perfect time to be strategizing. Okay, what am I creating? And even if you're already doing something that's recurring content, how can you develop it to be even, thinking about the full spectrum in mind, right? How is this recurring content at some point going to encourage people to want it enough to opt in or to give me their contact information? And how is it going to feed all of these other pieces of my infrastructure? Because this is the time to be figuring out how to monetize these different revenue streams, but, not having to do it in a super forceful way. You can generate this almost organically by just doing these things. So I'm really excited for us to talk about that next week.
Yeah, so am I. I think it's so important, like you said, to view all of these pieces of your music marketing not in a silo. They're an ecosystem that works with each other.
Absolutely.
And when you can start to view them that way and view your content that way, that's where you're really going to see the big leaps and bounds of taking fans from one stage to another and just growing your relationship with them.
Absolutely. All right, Indies. So that's our episode for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we'll be talking about recurring content, and hopefully we can help you brainstorm some really cool stuff to do for your artistry.
We'll catch you guys soon.
All right. Bye, Indies.
East Coast, West Coast, say what?